Start with a small POC. Figure out what's one problem you want to solve. Don't try to boil the ocean. If your KPI is, we're going to use AI, like that's not a KPI.
Hi everyone. Today I'm joined by Matti from V4 Final. Her journey is one of those rare crossovers. She's gone on from being an engineer to a lawyer and now a founder. She's built legal tech that actually moves business velocity forward. It's not just digitizing paperwork. We're going to be unpacking how automation and AI is reshaping legal and security functions, what privacy by design really looks like when it's implemented well, and how companies can turn compliance from a cost center into a real growth enabler. But Matti, before I dive into all of that, why don't you give us the quick version? What's V4 Final about, and what have you been up to?
Well, V4 Final is really about being the first client-centered legal tech. Lots of interesting stuff coming out in the legal tech world right now, especially with generative AI and the capabilities of both compute and GPT. But a lot of them are focused on like how to analyze the law, how to, get lawyers to write memos and briefings faster. And I've turned that on the head. I've been a transactional attorney for my legal career, and that means I give advice. I tell people how to create products, how to run businesses in a way that complies with the law, whether it's privacy and cybersecurity, or just ethics compliance, financial compliance, HR compliance. When you're in-house, you cover a wide range of things. And I wanted to build legal tech that really focused on getting the client the results they needed. Not just good legal advice. Lots of lawyers give great legal advice, and they don't need, ChatGPT to improve their legal advice. They're very good at that. But lawyers need to make sure that they're also moving their client's business forward. Because perhaps you've ever heard the phrase that the safest ship never leaves the harbor. Lawyers can be a little risk adverse, a little. Mm-hmm. And to get lawyers to focus on how do we balance the legal risk with the business needs so that we don't just hold back the company, but actually move it forward in the right direction and in a way that's sustainable and growable for our clients. Like we should be a growth enabler for the clients, not just the Department of No. So that's really what I've focused on with the technology. And I've combined it with years of quality systems and process engineering that I did before I went to law school. When you're a Six Sigma process engineer working in high volume manufacturing and semiconductor, and you go to law, you realize that lawyers don't really do process well. Like the answer to everything is it depends, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how do we put a little bit of structure around it so that we can actually move it through an advisory process in a way that meets the client's needs, without tying the hands of the legal team such that they can't give, they have the flexibility they need to give the right advice at the right time, and they can modify that process as needed to bring in the right experts to consult with internal and external parties. Like how do we make sure that they can be efficient and effective at their jobs while still being able to track some sort of process from start to finish?
That's really interesting. And I think 2 points, right? When you mentioned that lawyers say it depends, I mean, they share that a lot in common with engineers as well. It's because when you speak with engineering teams and they say, hey, how much time is this going to take? It depends, right?
Right.
But most engineers that work with legal teams and, even our relations with, in-house legal teams, oftentimes there's complaint about friction. And then obviously on the lawyer side and the attorney side, they're saying they're protecting risk. You've seen both sides, right? It's not like one's wrong. It's all about the tooling and visibility not really aligning well. So walk me through like the very early days of V4 Final. I mean, I know that you had worked, building an in-house tool, just kind of like improve the efficiency of the teams, and then that kind of prompted the idea. Walk me through, when did that idea really strike you? How did you go about expanding on it, and then to where we are today?
Well, like you said, and like I've told you, when I was in-house, at one point in time, I was asked to build an automated workflow for privacy review. And this was, post GDPR, and privacy work was increasing, and every new product, a new system in the company needed to go through a privacy review if it processed personal data. And a lot of times we just had to send everything through anyway because people didn't have a good idea of what personal data was. And so you had to put everything through it for the appropriate authorities and people with the knowledge to say, yes, that is personal data, or no, it's not personal data. So there's a lot of work. And they said, oh, you can build an automated workflow for this. And we have a tool, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to name and shame. But they gave me this tool, and they said, oh, it's a no-code solution. You can build any workflow you want. And you were an engineer. You should be able to do this no problem. Well, I was a hardware engineer. I've very little coding in my background. I've just started to do it again, thanks to, Claude on GitHub. But I built it. And I thought it was terrible. It wasn't agile. It was very set in stone. Even though we could build the exact workflow we needed, I couldn't do it by myself. I had to hire an external consultant and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars to put the workflow together. But we finally got it up and running and people using it, and we were getting good information. And then this big case in the EU came down called Schrems II. And Schrems II was a court of justice holding in Europe about what you needed to do to document the processing of personal data when that data moved across borders. And it completely upended GDPR and your privacy operations processes. And that's when we found out that we had basically, in engineering speak, we had hard-coded a process. And we couldn't go in and just change the things we needed. We literally had to build an entirely new process and then manually transfer over everything that was in process. Plus, because of Schrems 2, we had to restart everything we had previously done because it had to be reanalyzed under the new rules. And so, another couple $100,000 of consultant fees to rebuild the new one, and then several contracts with contract workers to go through and push everything else through and do the manual rewrite. And at one point in time, the vice president of my legal operations team, she actually put me up for this award for innovation in legal technology. And I won it. And I just remember thinking, this is ridiculous. Not in true like imposter syndrome ways, like, oh, I don't deserve the award. No, I worked my ass off. I'm fine to take the award. But that the bar was so low that qualified as innovation in legal technology. So fast forward years later, and I actually started getting involved in the venture capital community here in my town. And I saw what people were building. I was going to invest in companies that were building new stuff, be a venture capitalist, put my money in, sit back, get rich, do nothing. And I saw what they were doing, and I thought, man, with all this great stuff now, somebody must have built a better legal workflow tool to do things like privacy reviews or any type of, hey, I need legal's help. I need a lawyer for the company to advise me on something. From the minute you say I need a lawyer to all the way through and the business acted on it and here's the impact it had on the business, full closed loop system. Surely somebody's building this by now. I'm going to find that company. I'm going to invest in it. I'm going to sit back and get rich while they work. And I couldn't find it. And I kept looking. I couldn't find it. And I was like, no, this has to exist. It's such a great tool. But I gave up looking for it and decided to build it. And, okay, it's no longer sit back, let somebody else work and get rich. Now it's put a lot of time and effort and my own money and my co-founder's money on the line to try to bootstrap right now and get this product built. And we got it built. We've done some iterations. It started off very contract focused. And then we realized there's so much other than contracts that needed to be handled. And we didn't need to focus on the contracting workflows because there's a lot of contract workflow software already out there that has open APIs. And we could put it behind our tracking system so that you could go from, hey, I need legal. And once you find out it's a contract negotiation, then you can incorporate it into the contract negotiation software. But then once that's done, send it to the business, find out, was it signed? If it was signed, was it implemented? Are people happy with it? What's the closed loop? What was the final action by the company so that you were successful? And a lot of the interest I have right now is people who are like, oh yeah, we bought these tools, we've bought these AI tools, or we've developed AI tools, and we don't know who's using them. We don't know how they're used. Right. We don't know if they're getting an ROI for the company. And so that's what I'm doing a lot of proposals right now. It's like, hey, let us put this behind our our front door. Somebody called it a legal performance management platform. Not so much the individual performance management, but the team's performance management. So let us put it into this performance management, and we'll tell you if it's being used. We'll tell you if you're getting your ROI. We'll tell you if it's, adding business value, or if it's just, a fancy add-on that's not being utilized.
I love that. That's an amazing origin story. And to your point about contract automation and contract workflows, I mean, we see that as the number one primary use case of choice. When we're speaking with law firms and legal teams, is that we've got all of these different workflows. We've got a lot of paperwork that we need to process, and we'd like to get started with this. But oftentimes, there's also the paradox of choice, where you're dealing with too many different use cases. You're dealing with too many different options. Right. And a lot of IT leaders, a lot of CIOs and legal security leaders, they definitely want to modernize. They want to move forward and ensure that they're adapting AI to the best of its ability. But they're not product or IT people. So let's say when you're sitting down with a GC who's skeptical and they definitely want to go in this particular direction, how would you go through the process of, hey, let's look at it both bottom up, top down, and see what are the different use cases here, and how do you help them identify, this is the direction that we should be going in when AI in legal is to be adopted, or when you're looking to modernize. So how do you go through that process with them?
I mean, the first thing I would ask them is like, what's your biggest problem that you're trying to solve when it comes to having a positive impact on your clients? What's your biggest challenge? Is it contracts? There's so much in contracting right now because they've even done studies. Every in-house lawyer will have to work with contracts. 100% of in-house lawyers do contracting. You'll never get away from it. It's not what most in-house lawyers are hired only to do. Some of the bigger companies, they have they have commercial contracting, legal teams that just do contracts. But in some of the smaller ones, you might have a general counsel who was hired for securities and M&A work to take the company public and to manage investor relations. They still have to do the contracts. Even in large organizations, I mean, I worked at Microsoft. I think they're up to like 900 in-house lawyers now, a crazy number of lawyers. I can guarantee you every lawyer in that company has had to deal with a contract at one point in time, even if they were hired for, government affairs and being on the lobbying side, or my main job was to advise the Azure team on compliance with things like national security standards for the government Azure deployment. I still had to deal with contracts. The commercial team would send me as a subject matter expert in these areas. You have to deal with contracts. So I think that's why a lot of legal tech right now focuses on the contract workflow, because every transactional lawyer will at some time have to deal with contracts. So that's your biggest customer base. That's the one issue that everybody has to deal with. So you see a lot of it in that area. And then the other area, of course, is in litigation matters, because lawyers usually fall in one of two buckets. You're either transactional like me, you give advice, you guide clients through their business activity or their daily activity. Others are litigators. They go to court. They make legal arguments in front of judges or administrative boards. They have to brief the court. They have to write jury instructions, appellate briefs. It's very different practices of laws. They don't go into contracts unless there's a big dispute over it, but they don't write the contracts. And for good reason. Like if a litigator wrote a contract, it would probably be 350 pages long, because they would try to address every possible litigation issue you could ever think of. Right. Talk about the safest ship never leaving the harbor. You'd get that contract as a business leader. You'd be like, nope.
Absolutely. And coming to let's say privacy by design, that's another major key, especially when you're implementing AI as far as all of these contract workflows or any other modernization work in legal is concerned. And you've been an advocate for that for years.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of like one of the things that I at least see based on I hear based on my conversations with them is the gap that's often being missed is traceability, which is mapping a privacy requirement, let's say back to code or forward to an audit. And we've seen teams use, let's say, policy as code or compliance automation to handle that. But is that generally the direction that you see this really going and sticking moving forward? Or how have you seen this really, work out in execution?
It works out in very different ways depending on the priorities of who's building. Compliance automation is primarily about looking for evidence of compliance post-build. And it's always good to keep in mind too that there's a difference between compliance and design. And I also work heavily in cybersecurity, and there's a big difference between compliance and security. I always tell people you can design a secure system that is completely non-compliant because you haven't written down any of your policies or your processes, you haven't shown your work on your decision making, but it could be really, really secure. You just don't have the evidence of, say, following a given standard set of controls on it. And same thing, you can create a completely insecure system that's got all the right paperwork around it, but because you've basically never implemented anything to truly secure it, it's compliant with what you say you do, but what you're doing isn't necessarily secure. So you can have a non-secure system that is compliant, and you can have a compliant system that is, and you can have a secure system that is non-compliant. They're very different things in security. In privacy, compliance has more to do with how you process personal information and, of course, how you document it. Compliance is all about having the evidence to support your activities as being aligned with your legal obligations. So it's more documentation, and a lot of the compliance automation is about automating that documentation, not necessarily about doing the design right from the beginning. So, you have to look at design from the beginning, structuring your underlying databases, your back-end infrastructure, making sure that you don't put your secrets in the front end. You put your secrets in the back end, and you don't hard code them into your GitHub. You put them in a secure repository aside from that. And you're not going to run a compliance check on that. That's pure security. And same with personal information. I have a lot of people say, oh, we'll just anonymize everything. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If you anonymize it too much, you're going to give up security because you can't trace user activity. Just because it is personal data doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means you have to be very thoughtful about how you use it and make sure you have you have a legal right to use it in that way. So, designing from the bottom up, both security by design and privacy by design, very different depending on what type of app you're making. We're doing this, enterprise legal team performance management platform. We don't have to have a lot of personal data. We just, our login authentication and access controls. Obviously, we have user IDs that we have to track. And we have to use those. Those have to be personal IDs because we have to be able to ensure the right people, only the people with access have access. Only the people with the right to access have access. So we can't anonymize everything. So then we have to make sure that information is secure and it's protected. We make sure all of our customers are in their own isolated instances, so we don't commingle data between customers. We deal with really sensitive information, not just personal information, but the attorney-client privileged information, the trade secrets of our customers that they're asking their legal for advice on, their sensitive data that they want to go to legal, and they need the ability to be completely candid with legal so they can get the right legal advice. But that data, they don't want that to get out anywhere. So we have to make sure it's highly segregated between every customer. In fact, we designed it from the bottom up to run inside a customer environment with no access for ourselves because we know that customers don't want to share that information with us. So, but that's because of the type of info we deal with. If you're not dealing with that type of info, if you're, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones I've seen. A friend of mine here is doing this mobile phone app to create yourself an AI avatar to meet with other people's AI avatars to see what you have in common. And if they find a good match between avatars, they suggest you, meet for coffee or a hike to become friends. He swears it's not a dating app, but he's like, no, it's just to find friends, because there's a lot of people who move. I live in Bend, Oregon, and a lot of people move here because it's a beautiful place to live. But then they come in and like, oh, well, how do I make friends? So there's always people trying to figure out where their little tribe is in the city once they've moved here, and that's what led him to create it. But he's obviously dealing with a lot of personal information because he's trying to make personal avatars. But how much information you give that avatar is up to you. You can control that. You don't have to be, you don't have to disclose everything to that avatar just to make it work. Whereas you really do need to disclose a lot to a lawyer to make sure you get the right legal advice. So very different risk profiles.
All right. Now, this is really interesting. And, a follow-up question that I had to that is obviously, making sure that, compliance doesn't slow things down, because with AI and data laws changing almost every quarter, every now and then, just when you think you've figured it out, there's a new change, or there's something else that comes right out of the horizon. So what's your framework for product and legal teams to, stay agile? Like, how do you maintain that balance there?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing we're doing to maintain that balance, at least when I build, and how I work with my CTO on building the software, I do try to stay up to speed on all of the new global regulations and what's coming down the pipeline. That's my area of expertise as a lawyer, was in those digital regulatory compliance, technology law. Just this morning, I saw like a 160-page release from a new European Union legal update that's updating GDPR and DSA and cyber resiliency and AI Act. It's like updating everything and referencing them all together. So I'm always keeping an eye on that, keeping an eye on some of the international standards, the ISO 42001, the new compliance regime that the EU has enacted for AI compliance. And we just try to stay on top of it, combined with like security best practices, quite frankly. But then in terms of the legal team and making sure they have the flexibility, that's what we build the platform on. And then we want to make sure that they can use that platform in whatever way they need to use best. So we don't try to do very strict workflows. We don't want to hard code approvals. Like, every approval over $10 million needs to go to Joe in finance. Well, Joe goes on vacation and that's not going to work. Joe leaves the company. That's not going to work. Joe gets sick. That's not going to work. So how do we make sure that you can adjust on the fly without losing the information, because you're not storing it in email or SharePoint or anything like that? The whole file kind of stays together. And if you find out Joe's on vacation, you can add in Joe's replacement or coverage, and they'll get to see everything. And then when Joe is back, you can actually just take them off, and they no longer have visibility. So it's time-based, kind of a need-to-know basis. And it's all controlled by the legal team, which is a key part of maintaining privilege. Like, the lawyers can control who has access to the legal advice, and that helps maintain privileged communications. So, or even, they work with an outside law firm and they've given their outside lawyer access to their tool to manage the performance of the outside counsel team. Well, and then your outside counsel goes, oh, got a great offer to join as a partner at this other firm. I'm going to go now and I'm going to change firms. And a lot of times when that happens, the legal team's like, well, no, we like you. Like, we love your firm. That's great and all. But we want to keep working with you. Well, they keep their login. They don't have to stay with their firm. It's not a firm, and all the records stay with the legal team. You don't have to try to extract all the records from the prior firm, make sure everything transfers over. It all stays in the control of the client, the company, and not the lawyers. So it really adds to that flexibility. The legal team can work with the lawyers that are the most effective, the most efficient, the most well-versed in the business needs, no matter where that lawyer goes. Some exceptions, of course, like if the lawyer leaves the company and goes to a competitor, you shut off their access. We have, it's domain level access control. So you don't get to go to the competitor and keep your login rights. It's SSO for that.
I think, like, coming to collaboration and decision making. I mean, you've seen both sides of the fence, right? You've been part of internal teams that have been brought together to collaborate on projects, and now you're also on the other side of the fence, where you kind of have to ensure that you have all of these teams come together and align on the vision for, let's say, implementing something like V4 Final or implementing any modernization project internally.
Yeah.
Some of the CIOs that I've spoken with of law firms, it's a mix, right? It's also a culture thing. Like, they'll say that, yeah, it's very easy for our attorneys to get in, collaborate on the shared vision of how we want to go about this. In some cases, it's pulling teeth. It's very difficult to get everybody together. So considering that legal, IT, security, they all operate in silos at most of these law firms, at most of these companies. In your experience, what have you actually seen really work to break these silos and bring everybody together beyond, let's just collaborate on this particular initiative? Like, how do you really ensure that you have all of
Yeah,
these teams getting together?
part of it is pure communications. Legal teams and IT teams and security teams, we speak different languages, sometimes using the same words to mean totally different things. And you have to break it down. Like if I tell an IT administrator that I want to implement a no-code workflow, they'll be like, "Oh, okay." If I tell a paralegal at a small legal department, I need you to implement a no-code workflow, they're going to go, "What's that?" Uh, so our goal is really, we're selling to the legal departments, and our goal is to make it iPhone level simple. Like if you don't have to spend a lot of time when you get your new iPhone, or even when you get your first iPhone. You don't need 10 hours of training courses on how to use it. That's how simple we want this to be able to use. Now, we do have security features like SSO that we do need some IT support for a company, a corporate domain, to make sure that we can tag into that. So that's where I get to work with my CTO very closely, where he's like, "Oh yeah, all they need to do is this." And I'm okay, write it down, because I need to know that I understand this. Because if I don't understand it, the customer's not going to understand it. I have a decent level of knowledge on it. And I joke that one of my superpowers was translating technical into legal and legal into technical. But trying to make sure we have really clear instructions, not just, "Oh, you need to enable SSO through SAML authentication." That means nothing to a lawyer. But it's literally, you need to start a ticket with your IT company. So if you use Jira for ticket or ServiceNow for ticket management, you need to start a ticket. This is what you put in the ticket. This is the instructions you give. This is how it's going to happen. This is the documentation they're likely to ask for. Because I've been on that side of the buying persona where I'm like, okay, here's all the hoops you have to jump through for security and privacy and to connect to our systems. So we make sure we have that documentation up front and ready. So, here's all your security paperwork. Here's our architecture diagrams. We're very transparent about how we're architecting and building everything so that our customers have everything packaged up nice, tied with a nice little bow to hand to their security team and their CIO team and their IT team that says, "This is exactly what we need you to do. Here's your checklist. We don't want to create more work for you." And then I walk the legal team through how to do that. Like, how do you engage with your IT team generally for this? Do you have a ticket system? Do you just call Arun from IT and say, "Hey, I need this"? Shout out to my former IT guy. So what do you need? And then I help get that to them in the simplest language possible so that the lawyers understand it at a high level, but they can easily communicate to whatever technical resource they have what needs to be done, how security is maintained. And we look to like the ISO 27001 security controls with kind of the assumption that our customers are following those. So, here's how to enable it without breaking your 27001 control set. Just make sure they have that information and it's in plain language for the legal team to be able to communicate with the IT team.
Definitely, I mean that's something that's really, really important. I mean, outside of the communication piece, is having everybody speak the same language. But beyond that, one thing that we're also seeing pick a lot of traction is the idea of shared KPIs, right? As you get to, let's say, the beginning of the quarter or the beginning of the year, H1 2026, a lot of those conversations are already happening internally.
Oh, yeah.
Where, here's what our vision for 2026 looks like. H1, this is what we want to achieve. Security, IT, and this particular practice team, all of you guys need to get together, and this is what we need to get to by the end of the first 6 months of the year. And then that kind of brings everybody together, kind of align a lot more closely on, here's exactly how we want to achieve it, and this is exactly what the communication cadence and development cadence is going to look like from here.
Yeah, luckily we don't have a lot of development needs. Like I said, we're trying to make it iPhone level simple.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be maintained by the IT department. The maintenance should all be done at a cloud infrastructure level, granted deployed within an isolated environment per customer. If a customer really wants to be, I'm not going to say air-gapped, it's not going to be an air-gapped system, but if they really wanted to operate wholly within their security boundaries, they might have a little more manual updating that might have to be done when things are changed. But we want to make it as simple as possible.
Absolutely. One piece of advice that you'd give to CIOs or legal leaders who want to turn their who want to basically turn their functions into innovation drivers, what would that be?
Start with a small POC. Figure out what's one problem you want to solve. Don't try to boil the ocean. If your KPI is we're going to use AI, like that's not a KPI. That you can't measure against that. You don't know if you're successful if you're not. If you say, okay, we're going to implement, if we want to see if we can use an automated workflow to simplify the NDA processes because we've got an AI-based NDA tool, but we want to make sure people are using it right. Then do a proof of concept that says, okay, we're going to do NDA automation behind, the V4 Final performance management platform, and that way we're going to know how many people are using our NDA AI, which divisions are they in, which business groups, which geos, how much time is it taking, how much time is it saving? Can we compare, can you actually set up an experiment, a controlled experiment? Can we compare the manual processing of NDA approval to our new AI NDA tool to see if it's actually saving us time and effort? All while making sure you stay controlled over who has those who has access to and is using that NDA automation tool. Because I've seen people like go in and they want to adopt AI. So somebody be like, oh, I built this, chat GPT or Copilot based contract reviewing thing. And now I just send my contract through the AI and it tells me if it meets the legal playbook. And then I can just sign off on it. I don't even need to call legal. And part of the legal team's going, great, we're getting more done with less. And another part's going, who's using it? How are they using it? What's happening to the contracts? Like, what do any of these look like? Are they going into the contract management system after they're done? All of a sudden, you've adopted AI, but you've lost control over everything. What does success look like in a proof of concept? If you want to use AI for contracting, what does success look like? And then are you adopting a tool that lets you measure success?
Absolutely. No, that's a beautiful way to end it. Thanks so much, Matti. I think this is really, really practical, and I think a lot of takeaways for legal teams here. Last few quick ones before I let you go. So, number one tool that every in-house legal team should adopt today. You can't say V4 Final, so.
If I did, I'd be overwhelmed, right? Like everybody's going to call me. I'm like, I don't know if we're ready for that. We're just taking some early access customers right now. Gosh, the number one tool. I don't know if it's a number one tool. Like everybody should be using search and some LLM, some generative AI tool. I'd say the biggest thing is not so much which tool to use, but learn the difference between when search is the right tool and when LLM is the right tool, because they're not necessarily interchangeable. But yeah, get used to the LLMs.
Yeah. One emerging regulation that a lot of leaders are massively underestimating right now.
The Cyber Resiliency Act in Europe. So It's going to come full into play, I think, at the end of 26 or early 27. And if you don't meet the cybersecurity requirements of the European Union, you cannot sell into Europe. So if you're not paying attention to that, it's gonna bite you in the butt.
So as you went about building V4 Final, so like what is that one book or framework or the thought process that really influenced how you build it?
Probably the Lean Startup. Eric Ries, the Lean Startup.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know if it influenced how we built it, but it influences how we take customer feedback, how we action it, what metrics we look for, particularly about not focusing on vanity metrics, but really focusing on impact and returns that our customers can get. That's probably the biggest thing. We want to make a difference for our customers, not just get touch points.
Matti, thanks so much again. What's the best resource for people to be able to find you online and get in touch with you?
To get in touch with me, best resource is LinkedIn. Definitely, I'm a heavy LinkedIn user. We have the v4final.com website. I'm not great at keeping it up to date, but if you reach out on LinkedIn, I can guarantee I'll see it. Unless you're trying to sell me something, we're in full build mode with not a lot of revenue yet, so I'm not buying. But if you reach out and you want to know more about the product, I'm happy to set up a demo, show you what we can do, find out what problems in-house legal teams are facing, and see if we've got the right tool for them.
Definitely. Well, thank you for coming on, Matti, and I'm really excited to see how V4 Final shapes up, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate meeting you at the RLLB, and getting to know you and appreciate the time on your podcast. Thank you, Damraj.